gentlemen, without further ado, please give a big welcome to your BLEXIT founder, Candace Owens.
Did you guys enjoy the show? We don't have too much time, so I'm not going to be able to do my normal spiel, but I want to say this. I want you to know why I wanted Maddie to sing. I wanted Maddie to first sing a patriotic song, that song, My Country 'Tis of Thee, because it unites everybody, every single person in this room. Ray Charles, there's a great video of him singing that song. There are so many videos of Black Americans beautifully singing patriotic anthems because they understood that this country gave us opportunities that we would have never had we been anywhere else. If you are an American and you are breathing today, you are a part of a generation of people that are the luckiest who have ever lived in the face of the planet ever, okay? That's the truth. The second song, Amazing Grace, and I'm going to tell you why I love that song. First and foremost, I walked down the aisle to Amazing Grace when I got married, and the song is always, I never knew the history of the song. It's just a song that when you hear it, it does something to you. You feel it. There's something about Amazing Grace that you feel. And so I thought to myself, let me actually look up this song, Amazing Grace. Where does it come from? Where does this hymn come from? The story of Amazing Grace is it was written by a man named John Newton. He was a British man, and he didn't grow up with any theological basis. He had no religious convictions in his youth. He was sent to the Royal Navy. He was forced to go there in that time. And after a few years, he switched lifestyles and he joined the African slave trade. He used his ship and his vessel to transport slaves from Africa. And in 1748, there was a storm at sea off the coast of Ireland, which he did not think he was going to survive. And he reached out and he said, God, please have mercy on me. Have mercy on me. And he survived. 6 years later, he gave up seafaring altogether, and he decided to dedicate his life to Christian theological studies. And he was ordained in the Church of England, and he began writing hymns, and he wrote Amazing Grace. He actually wrote it as a song that was supposed to go with the New Year's Day sermon. And the song actually didn't pick up in Britain. It didn't pick up. It never became popular until years later. It did pick up in America. It picked up in America in the South when there was a revival of Protestant religion in the South. And it also picked up amongst the slaves. Suddenly, the slaves began singing this hymn as they would work. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And when you listen to slaves sing hymns, when you listen to the heart and the soul that was behind them singing the hymns, it's an incredible experience to really process people that were in this horrendous position, singing this hymn that was written by somebody who had a spiritual awakening about Savior, about grace, and about God. And I think the reason that the song means so much to me, and I think to every single person, why you instantly want to sing along, is because we're all the wretched, right? That saved a wretch like me. That is exactly how I feel, the blessing that I feel every single day, that I get to stand on stage and I get to have not just a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, a fifth chance, because I was a wretch, right? I made terrible decisions when I was young. Kingface talked about the decisions he made when he was young. Brandon talked about him being arrested. Brandon Tatum, right? All of us led these paths. We're down these paths that were so meaningless and so harmful and so hateful. And then we were saved. I was saved simply by conservative principles, right? That is the chance that God gave me. Conservative principles. Go back to your root. Figure out who you are, right? And I realized that while I was living my life liberal, while I was going around thinking that I was free because I was following no rules, right? Liberalism and leftism. There are no rules in life. You should do and say and be whatever you want to be and not be respectful to other people. Don't acknowledge truths. You can live in lies because you can lie and lie and lie. That's a form of freedom. And I lived that way. I lived that way for 20-some years until that thing that was supposed to feel like freedom started to feel like bondage. I realized nothing in my life was real. Nothing that I had was tangible or real. Not my relationships, not my friendships. Nothing was real because we were all building ourselves upon a lie, a foundational lie. When I lost my grandmother in 2013, that was the beginning of a turning point for me. My grandmother was really the only mother that I knew, and she raised all of us in the way that grandparents are able to raise, it seems like everyone in the family, cousins, brothers, sisters. We all felt that we were raised by my grandmother and my grandfather. And when my grandmother was taken into the hospital in 2013, they thought she'd be out in 48 hours. But I got on a plane anyway, and I went down to Fayetteville, North Carolina to see her. And I had this big, expensive bag. I had just started working in private equity. And as soon as I got a check, even though I was some $100,000 in student loan debt, I went and bought a fancy bag so I could fit in and look cool. And my grandmother, she must have known that she wasn't going to make it out of the hospital because she took time to speak to me and each of my siblings and all of my cousins individually. And the last word she said to me, the first thing she said to me was, "Candace, you need to forgive your mother." It's random. We weren't talking about my mother. We weren't talking about my upbringing. I had a tough one. And then she said, "I worry about you. I worry about you in New York City. I worry about you because you're losing yourself." And I laughed it off, and I said, "Grandma, it's fine." I got on a plane. In 24 hours, she was dead. So it was it was a moment for me because I suddenly started thinking about my grandmother and reflecting upon the upbringing and reflecting upon the ways that they had raised me, the things that I had run from. Growing up in my grandfather's home, there were nothing but rules. We had to be sitting around the table, reading the Bible before we head to school. He would ask us questions. He would not serve us a plate in the morning. He would ignore us if we didn't say good morning. It was just a sign of respect. You don't come down here, you don't sit down and ask for food until you greet the person that is serving you and you say good morning. He ran a tight ship, and that ship was filled with love, a lot of rules, but more love. And it shaped me and my sisters when we were young. He planted the seeds of conservatism that I would be able to harvest later. My grandmother and my grandfather believed in the family structure. My grandmother grew up in Tortola, British Virgin Island. She had a lot of issues health-wise, and because she was considered crippled, because she walked a little funny, she was treated horribly, had a horrible upbringing, a horrible life. My grandfather grew up in a segregated South, so he had to work from the time he was 5 years old, laying out tobacco to dry in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Picking cotton in Fayetteville, North Carolina. 5 years old. Wrap your head around that. 5 years old, getting up before the crack of dawn. Otherwise, the Carolina sun is too hot. So you have to get up and you have to do man work, right? At 5 a.m. in the morning, crack of dawn. And my grandfather did it. He never complained. And what was remarkable is never once in our household when he would share the stories of his upbringing. Never once when my grandmother would share the stories of their upbringing did they ever complain. It was just what happened. My grandfather, despite surviving attacks from the Ku Klux Klan, never once in our household said a bad word about white people. It never happened, right? My grandfather would just say it was a different time. In fact, regarding the Ku Klux Klan, he talks about that story with such tremendous pride. He says, the KKK would come around and spray bullets in our home, and my daddy would grab the shotgun and shoot back at them boys, right? Boys, calling these terrorists boys, right? That strength, that victor mentality that my grandparents had, never complaining. It's so special. It's so special. It's the same victor mentality when you look just a few generations ago. And you look at the boys whose average age was 22 years old that left their home country to go land on the beaches of Normandy, right? Look at the images of those boys in World War II, the courage. Watch the documentaries about the conversations that were had. They knew they were going to die. They were 20 years old. People that were 18, flying and doing all of these things. Pilots that knew they didn't have fuel, that were flying towards Midway, and knew that if they made the decision to turn around, they weren't going to make it back. The courage, the strength, the way that these people fought and the way that these people lived, the principles that they had, the values that they had, those are the things that made America great, that made America unique. If we can go back to understanding that our strength and our values are naturally conservative, because let me tell you guys something, in times of real struggle and strife, everybody's a conservative. It is only in remarkable times of privilege, right, when you are so privileged and your life is so great, do you have time to debate bathroom signs and whether or not they're accepting enough, right? Only in times of real strife, everybody becomes a conservative, because conservative is about sensibility. It is the only way that we are going to move forward as a country if we all come together. If we all come together and we adapt and we realize that conservatism is what built this country. If we realize that every single person in this room is connected based on the fact that you were born and you are here in America. America is by far, in my opinion, the greatest country in the world, and I will tell you why. Because what unites America is a philosophy, and that philosophy is that if you work hard, like my grandparents did, and you stay out of trouble, and you make good decisions, this country will reward you. It is that simple. In closing, everything that I do is inspired by my grandparents. My book that is coming up is inspired. It is dedicated to my grandparents. It is dedicated to my grandfather, because after raising us in Connecticut, he went back to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and purchased the sharecropping farm that he grew up in. That is the American dream. That is what we have to fight to protect. Thank you guys so much for coming to BLEXIT, Florida. We love you.